Hey everybody, it's hwsteele and today is September 10th, 2021, and this is the second weekly video of the month of September 2021. Now you may have noticed that this video is coming out on a Friday and not a Thursday, and the reason for that is because I have been extremely busy this week. I've got a lot of stuff going on both personally and professionally and will for the next month and a half to 2 months. But anyway, that's the reasoning why this video is late. There's no secret meaning to it or anything like that. It's just simply I was not able to get to record it, edit it, and upload it until now. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the subject of this week's video, which is when should I rest and when should I actually take action? Or more specifically for people interested in trading, when should I not be trading? And we're going to look at it today from an astrological point of view. So I'm going to bring up Astrolog. And basically, this is all very basic, what I'm going to talk about in this. But we're going to look at Saturn, because Saturn's considered the big bad guy of the solar system. Now, the reality is Saturn's not a bad guy. Saturn is that boring guy who always does what he's supposed to. He doesn't have any fun. He's always there like he's supposed to. He gets everything done like he's supposed to. And as a result, the other planets, especially the, in quote, good planets or the fun planets, they kind of see him as a drag. He's kind of a boring guy. He's a drag down. He always brings them back to reality. And because of that, he's perceived or he's expressed to be negative. And the reality is he's not negative as a bad thing. He's just negative as in reduces the amount of positive. Think of it mathematically. As human beings, we tend to associate good with positive and bad with negative, but the reality is that's not completely really accurate. Okay? So even though Saturn's considered a negative planet or a bad planet, he's not really a bad planet. He is negative, as in reduces the amount of positive, but he's not bad. He's just doing exactly what he's supposed to do. Okay. Now, if we look at the zodiac here, we have Aries here. Aries ruled by Mars, Taurus ruled by Venus, then we have Mercury, the Moon, the Sun, and I'm talking about rulerships of these particular signs. We have Mercury ruling here, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, positive, Saturn rules here in Capricorn, negative, Saturn rules here in Aquarius, negative, and Jupiter rules here again in Pisces, positive. Okay? So when the new planets or rediscovered planets, we can call them, Uranus and Neptune, were brought into the picture. Uranus was plugged into here, and Neptune was plugged into here. So we have positive, negative, negative, positive. So that means that in addition to Saturn being a negative planet, Uranus is considered a negative planet, and Neptune is considered a positive planet. Now again, that doesn't really mean bad and good, it's just negative and positive influences, so to speak. Okay, so when we look at a birth chart or a horoscope, and I'm going to go ahead and go to 1776. I'm going to use the United States as an example. I'm going to go to July 4th. And the time of day doesn't really matter because I'm not going to talk about ascendant and descendant and anything of that nature. We're just talking about the mundane planets themselves in a mundane way. So this is what it looked like in 1776. The sun was at 103 degrees. Okay. And so we need to keep that in mind. Let me bring up the calculator here. 103 plus 180 equals 283. Anytime Saturn gets to 283 degrees in here, that can be considered negative for the United States because Saturn is in opposition to the sun, the natal sun, or where the sun was when the United States was technically born. So I'm not going to go through every single instance here, but I am going to go forward in time until a very popular period in time for folks who study Gann, WD Gann. And we're going to watch right here, we're going to watch for when Saturn gets to 283 degrees. And he gets real close to it right here in April of 1930 before he goes retrograde and comes back again. So around April of 1930, and if I bring up a chart of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, we see that the stock market had a reaction to that, right? So in theory, that would not be a tremendously good time to trade. Obviously, if you were shorting the market, you could. And the effect on the United States stock market, the general market, was very negative at that point in time. And we had this big, huge reaction, which eventually led to a 90% decline in the value of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which was the main focus at that point. If you had gone back 60 or 80 years, the main focus would have been, like, for instance, the railroads. So if we go forward, we can expect, one might think, hey, we can expect the next time Saturn hits that 283 degrees, we're going to get a big downturn in the stock market. So again, I'm looking down here for Saturn 283 degrees. Whoop. And we hit it February 4, 1960. So if we look at the chart, what will we expect? You might be thinking, well, the market should move down significantly because that's what happened last time. But what we get here in 1960 is basically a bit of a sideways move, a blip up, a little retracement there, and then the market goes up for a few years. So in other words, it looks completely different about what's, the market's behavior. So what's different? And the answer is this guy. Instead of being mostly in opposition to Saturn, right now we have Jupiter following Saturn very closely in this particular instance. In the 1960 instance of transiting Saturn, cruising over the opposition point of the natal sun of the United States of America. So while this guy brings correction, negative, all that kind of stuff, this guy shows up and basically wipes out that negativity almost immediately. So we don't have the reaction like we did before, right? So if we go forward in time again to when Saturn gets to that 283 degrees, and we'll look down there, 70, 82, 83. So somewhere around April 1989. And again, I'm not being hugely precise here, the exact days and things of that nature, because I'm making generalized points here. And so we have 1989 here, and again, we have a market, basically a sideways channel that is in a slight uptrend here at this point in time. And then in 1995, the market just goes parabolic. It shoots up dramatically from there. But again, we don't have a big crash. We have a different set of behaviors happening. And why is that? It's because these two big guys are here together with Saturn, right? And they're actually slower than Saturn. So we have a negative and a negative and a positive almost in opposition, but the positive that's up here is really slow. So these guys are going to cruise through, and he's going to be cleaning up the mess that they make, the in quotes mess. The reality is they're actually cleaning up other people's mess. So if you really want to think about it more accurately, these guys are cleaning up a mess, and this guy's making a mess. In other words, he's making the market go up after they're out of the area there. So that's why we get what we get here. Instead of a big downturn like in 1930, we get an up move here. Now what's interesting is a lot of people make this mistake. Let me go back on the chart here. A lot of people think the stock market is the economy, and it is not. It's part of the economy, but it's not. And it's not even really a very good representation of the economy necessarily. So a lot of people think that this right here is the Depression. this down move in the stock market, and that's not accurate. The depression in the 1930s actually it lasted somewhere like this. I mean, it was very long, a long time. The market was going up, during a lot of the depression right here, but the actual depression talks about the economy of the United States, not just the stock market. So if you're thinking that this is the depression right here, if you use the depression interchangeably with this down move of the stock market, you're not being correct. That's not accurate. The depression lasted in the economy for much longer. So if we go here to the 1990s right here, we have that April 1989 period where Saturn was in opposition. There was actually a depression in the economy, or not a depression, it was a recession actually. It wasn't as bad as a depression because we had some positivity right there also. So you have to understand that even though you might get a reaction in the stock market, the actual whole economy is not represented by the stock market, especially the Dow Jones Industrial Average. As the Dow Jones has aged, it's been less and less representative of the actual market. The actual economy, the whole economy, I should say, not the market. Which was why in the year 2000, when we had a top here, we had a small reaction, relatively speaking. But if you go to the NASDAQ, which that's where all the technology stocks were listed on that market, on that exchange, I should say. The NASDAQ did crash well over 80%. So there was actually a 1930s style crash and move down, 1929 to 1930, in the NASDAQ market around 2000. It's just that it wasn't the whole of the general market at that time. So the NASDAQ did react just like the Dow Jones Industrial Average did in 1930. The NASDAQ did in the 2000 top and then crash into 2003. But regardless, the point is we have a different reaction here because we have different things going on. While you can say, well, Saturn's in opposition to the United States sun there, and that's a negative thing, you can't just look at it in isolation right there. Because we have these other big guys, Jupiter, Neptune, and Uranus, to deal with also. And of course the other planets, but they have a much smaller time frame of influence. So now if we go forward again, let's get a little bit past it right there. Looking for 283 degrees of Saturn again. And that happens in January of 2019. And we can scroll forward here. So here's January of 2019. And we do get a big retracement here in right at the beginning of 2020, of course, and we're kind of sideways right there, but then we move up very quickly. So why would that be? It's because we have the same kind of scenario that we had in 1960 going on, where we have Saturn pulling us back to reality or bringing the market down, so to speak, and then we have Jupiter coming right afterwards and blowing us right back up, expanding us, right? So while this, I'm showing you this on the actual charts for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but it works for people the same way. Your personal finance, your personal ability to trade, for instance, which has to do with developing your own wealth and that kind of thing, that gets affected the same kind of way that the Dow Jones Industrial, the Dow Jones Industrial Average would, when Saturn is in opposition to your natal sun. So that's a way to figure out when you could or should trade necessarily. So in other words, when Saturn is in opposition to your sun, your natal sun, that's a good period of time to not be trading and to rest instead, to be using your mind, to take a physical activity, get a hobby, do something, go walking outside, do, jogging, exercise, something like that, and to study, to use your mind and to increase your knowledge as opposed to trying to increase your wealth. But you can also pay attention to the other big guys out there. It's not just Saturn, because the other big guys might be nowhere to be seen. And if that's the case, then Saturn is going to really bring you down to earth, so to speak. But if the big guys, like in this example right here, if Jupiter's right behind Saturn and the next year he comes to clean up that mess, then you're going to have a period of prosperity where you really should be getting back into trading, possibly, depending upon what's going on with other things. So the main thing to look at, you hear from a lot of people, is to look at Saturn. Is Saturn in opposition to your natal sun? Is Saturn returns, where Saturn come back to where they were in your natal chart, is another time that's roughly equivalent to that. It's not exactly, but it's considered a negative period of time. So a lot of people will look at that and just isolate Saturn and use Saturn in opposition to their ascendant, in opposition to their midheaven, in opposition to their natal sun, Saturn in opposition to its natal position or conjunct its natal position, are all looked at as negative periods of time. And those are times where you would be experiencing less gain, most likely financially. But also you have to look at what else is going on to determine what time frame you're looking at, because it might be a period of time where you have just several months where you shouldn't be trading, or you might have a period of time where you actually have several years where you should just kind of think about not trading. And your birth chart actually has an influence on how you react to aspects like that. So if you have a very positive or business positive birth chart, then you might actually have the wherewithal to chug through those periods of time and still have an increase in your life. It won't be as dramatic as when, for instance, Jupiter is doing something like being in opposition to your sun, your natal sun, or conjunct your natal sun. But it's still possible to overcome that with a really good birth chart. So anyway, I've actually gone a bit longer than I originally intended to. There's a lot more, obviously, that I could say, but I just wanted to point out a few things. And the basic idea is, when should I not be trading? First place to look is Saturn. And honestly, another place to look is Uranus, in opposition of your natal sun, conjunct to your natal sun, square to your natal sun. Also, when they come back into alignment with where they were themselves, where Saturn was during your natal period, during your horoscope, your birth, if I could actually say the right thing here. And then if you know the exact place and time that you were born, your ascendant and midheaven are also points that you would want to look at. And when they are transited by these planets, you would want to, these planets specifically being Saturn and Uranus as the negative ones, you would not want to trade, because those would be typically seen as periods of decrease or negative in your life when it comes to finances. So anyway, hopefully it's helpful to some people. Some of you, I'm sure, if you're bored by it, you're not listening by now, that's for sure. But anyway, I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a great week ahead, and I will talk to you in next week's video.